a second, then you can go ahead. Thanks, Will.
All right, are we ready? We can call the meeting to order at 7:01. Has there been a declaration of public notice?
Yes, there has.
Right. Order of business. Are there any public appearances today?
No, there are none.
Right. Moving on to the consent agenda. May I please have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Lorene, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, moving on to recognitions.
Okay. So the first days of school have been absolutely incredible. The energy from our students, teachers, staff filling the classrooms and buildings really has been heartwarming and fulfilling. And there are a number of photos from our first days that you can access that are linked as well on our page. And then aside from the excitement that comes from the first few days of school, the fifth graders at Granite Ridge School had something else to look forward to with a visit from Governor Evers last week. Students had an opportunity to ask questions and even got to play basketball with the governor. And again, there are a number of photos and links to media coverage for the event. So thrilled to have the governor and others join us last week. And then, of course, we're also—
And do you just want to add the others that were here? Gary Hebel and
Sure. So we had
Bill Underling.
sure, Representative Hebel, Senator Agard, as well as our state superintendent, Jill Underley. And then, of course, our extracurricular and student activities are underway as well. So our football team won their home opener on our refurbished stadium field on August 26th. And then we have a number of other athletics that are having extreme success. And so a number of links as well to some information about our boys and girls cross country, as well as our girls golf.
Well, and Dan, could I just add, I want to personally thank Andrew for mentioning the time of the football game. There were several of us that were down there, and I really encourage each and every one of the board members and the community to go see this beautiful new field. And the team played beautifully. They really did. It was kind of like, oh, this is a great field. It's a beautiful, right, Andrew? Great field, great night. Yep. And at first they wanted to make sure we were excited about the game. You know, we scored then, and it was La Follette. So, you know, there was this East Side vibe. So thank you guys all very much for making that such a great event.
All right, thank you, Susan. All right, next is correspondence and announcements. Susan?
Okay.
Oh.
And I think Andrew does too. I just wanted to note, there's a Monona Grove graduate who is a member of the fire department, who is just a great advocate for firemen and that role. He graduated from Monona Grove in 1996. His name is Robbie Verhulst. His father was a physical education instructor, a great involved community person, and our basketball coach prior to Coach Sweefel. And he's going to be on Channel 15 tonight at 10 p.m. If anybody from the community or anybody remembers Robbie and his contribution to the high school and the community. Again, you have to watch him do what he does rather than have me tell you that. It's pretty exciting.
Thank you, Susan. Andrew?
Yes, so I was given this task here because I'm junior vice at the VFW Post 7591. We have two contests that we do annually. One is called the Patriots Pen, and that is for our 6th to 8th graders. And we have Voices of Democracy for our 9th through 12th graders. Scott Groff, Councilor Groff, has been part of this for years. And so now I've been taking kind of the responsibility to get this out here for our students. This is something that does not need to be put in no curriculum. This is something to be done like after school, but we do have the rules and the applications right on vfw.wi.org. There is cash prizes for first, second, and third, and also whoever wins get pushed up to national, and that is almost worth about $10,000 to $30,000 for first place. So if we have any students that are interested, all of this has to be in by October 31st. So hopefully we can get some more students to apply and show their patriotism for our country, but also to represent our school district. And also, this was not on here, but this came in late. The VFW, the national chapter, do have a Teacher of the Year. Same thing. You just go here to the website. That information, the rules and the application. The application needs to be in by October 31st as well, and we'll be judging for the Teacher of the Year as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. If they do not have access to the website, should they reach out to you, Andrew?
They can so they can reach out to me. Also, they can reach out to Counselor Groff at the high school.
Excellent. All right, thank you. All right, next is our administrative reports. 2021 Seclusion and Restraint report, and that's Krista Foster.
Yeah, go ahead. So the seclusion restraint report, same format as we've always used. As you can see, we had 4 incidences in the 2020-21 school year. This is always reported for the prior year, just on a regular basis at this point in time. Questions, feedback on the seclusion restraint report for the 2021 school year?
Eric?
Hey, Krista, just wondering, can you just maybe give a quick overview? I'm not really up to date on the training that the staff has for seclusion and restraint, and make sure that and confirm they're following it and that thing.
Sure. Yeah, we use nonviolent crisis intervention training, the CPI version of nonviolent crisis intervention training. We have well over 100 trained staff members. It's a required training for our student services and special education staff, including our special education assistants. And we do require refresher trainings on a regular basis. Once every 2 years after your first 5 years, we require an annual refresher for the first 5 years, and then every other year to maintain that certification. And that's a chance for our crisis team members to come together, to debrief, to problem solve, to get updated information. And if you're familiar with nonviolent crisis intervention training, the vast majority of the training content is proactive verbal de-escalation and intervention. And we spend a lot of time weaving in sort of our trauma-informed practices and strategies. And then that training is where a small number of the number of individuals are then trained to intervene. And if incidences arise that are truly a danger to self or others, they are able to intervene physically or to engage in seclusion and are trained to do so.
So I have a question about with the fully inclusive model and universal design, is there a reason why this is only required for special education staff and not all staff, like regular educators as well?
Yeah, we have a lot of regular educators that we've always encouraged the training, and we have a large number of general education, regular classroom teachers who have participated. That's a really good reflection. I mean, I think that that's been an area of growth, is to continue to do the work, especially around the de-escalation strategies. We weave that in some other ways. I think in terms of the training, yeah, just balancing that with all the other things we're asking staff to do. We do the majority of those trainings over the summer and keep that team. So yep, we keep a large number of required staff members, and each building has sort of that core crisis intervention team that can work together and problem solve with one another and kind of stay up to date with their skills. But we certainly encourage and allow and encourage participation from general education teachers, and sometimes we'll invite teachers specifically if they might find themselves in a situation where they're a critical member of that team.
Yeah, that's great. I almost wish it would be a requirement, not necessarily because I think regular educators, special educators are the experts, but it's really good for all the educators to understand what's happening in those situations. So, I mean, that might be something to think about.
Yeah, and we have, the numbers kind of fluctuate. I think we have 3 current trainers in the district as well. So we do tap into their expertise and have them work with individual teachers, but also crisis teams within the buildings on an ongoing basis. So that's a part of our model that we like, is to have those folks available to provide that coaching and support.
Okay, thank you, Krista.
Elizabeth?
Hi, how's it going, Krista? 2 things. One, actually, I think your suggestion, Eric, is a really good one around how do we bridge the gap between what our regular educators and our classroom-based staff kind of know in terms of just, one, how process happens, because it can be really easy to like see it but not fully understand it, or sort of not know what happens after a student gets removed, or those kinds of things. And also just to support, continuing education around just good de-escalation strategies. So I think that that's a really good suggestion, Eric. So I just want to say that. My second question to you, Krista, is, although, I always like the number to be 0, 4 is extraordinarily low, even by our standards when we look at last year. And so obviously the fact that we weren't in school for a good portion of the year is a contributing factor to the numbers being low. But sort of apart from that, can you think about or have any ideas or insights in terms of what some other contributing factors might be for us having low numbers this year, which for the record is a good thing, right? So if we can continue this trend, I think it's a good thing. I'm just kind of curious about, other than the obvious, right, what other contributing factors may have caused a decrease?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think you've named the obvious factors, that we didn't have students in school for a large portion of last school year. However, we did have a large percentage of our students, particularly at the elementary level, which typically make up the bulk of the incidents that I report every September. We did have 70-ish% of those students in classrooms for, a not insignificant amount of time in the spring. So I guess I don't want to make light of, or, assume that it's just, this was solely pandemic. I think as we talked about last school year, there was some trepidation around physical contact and the need to intervene. And I know our crisis teams gave a lot of thought to what might this look like, and what kind of supports can we have in place. And I think when you think about our model, our hybrid model, some of the cohorting and the consistent staff, and there's a lot of reasons that could have contributed to that. I think our staff in general are just really thoughtful about, as we always desire, really focusing on those prevention and proactive strategies, and really just, and I guess I'll always pair it with too, the amount of work and effort and attention that went into relationship building, forming connections and maintaining connections. And every time we made a change to the model and the amount of times teachers were spent building connections with students, I have to suggest that that's probably not a coincidence, that our students felt connected. And just in general, I think the data reflect sort of the experience of our students as well. It's not just a fluke necessarily that, we have a really, really small percentage number of our students that are involved in this significant of an incident, but I think just sort of behavior in general looked a little different. last spring.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was wondering about that too. Both things. One, just the intense focus on relationship building. And if that made a difference. And also I keep thinking about, particularly at the lower levels, the amount of really explicit emphasis on social emotional learning, and specifically like the check-in at the beginning and the check-in at the end, and whether or not that's a good opportunity to have like pulse checks on kids who would maybe otherwise like be kind of simmering under the surface and then bubble up. So I was wondering that too. And I'm wondering, are there things that we're doing this year that we introduced last year that we're keeping because we thought they were good things, like to emphasize the relationship building aspect and some of the SEL pieces?
Really good point. I think the biggest thing is the shift in the model of delivering social instruction for social emotional learning, and sort of really working to embed those lessons more continuously into advisory, morning meeting, whatever those different formats that the schools already have, and to be more consistent and universal, and really engaging the classroom teacher in all of that as well, with a high level of support and coaching from student services staff. But that is by far the largest carryover item that we're the most excited about, is kind of shifting that model to that more universal SEL delivery. And it's a work in progress for sure, but our students definitely have more regular and consistent conversations and opportunities to engage in SEL. And our classroom teachers have certainly had the opportunity to lead that, and, and are generating their own ideas and teaming with student services in different ways, and shifting away from that model of, the occasional lesson without that carryover piece.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. And, kudos to you and your team. It was an incredibly tough year last year, especially. And although those 4 incidents aren't significant for the students that it was impacted, again, the fact that percentage-wise we're really low, I think speaks volumes to how the training and resources and supports that we're doing for students is really effective in terms of having them be engaged in the school environment. So congrats to you and your team.
Okay, thank you, Krista. Next is the superintendent's report. Dan?
Okay, I did not prepare a written report tonight or have any specific topics. As you know, we've been reporting out pretty regularly on our updates of operational plans leading up to the start of school, and a number of other things that we've been doing process-wise. And so really these last 2 weeks since we last met, of course, it's been a matter of just opening the doors and beginning school. So I thought, instead of trying to prepare some additional information other than what we recognized earlier tonight, the really positive start of the school year, just see if there's any areas of interest of board members tonight that you'd like us to comment on regarding to the reopening. Besides myself, of course, we've got our team here, so I'll be glad to answer any questions or speak to any part of the school reopening you have an interest in exploring.
Susan Manning?
Hi, Lorraine. Thank you. I had sent, again, you and Dan a note, just asking for an update on transportation, but because it's still so new, and they're just working so many kinks out, that I've thought about it. I think maybe that would be a good thing for the next board meeting toward the end of the month, because I think we'll have a better feel for, areas where there, instead of one incident, you might be able to see, well, this one isn't working well at this corner. And so we're just, how the staffing is working with Nelson's, how I know there was a group of students who were new 6th graders who didn't get back home till like 5:15. But those are just the clunks. So if you could just give us particularly with the new transportation plan and how people are responding to that, because I've walked a lot of those areas and I still have a couple concerns, but if they're not coming to the top for you, then I'll just wait and see how we go forward. But I think it would be helpful, probably have 2 weeks.
I would be more than happy to provide a report on transportation, and I would put a pitch out right now. Please pass the word. There is a national shortage of bus drivers.
Yes.
We did not need to change our bell times like Madison had to do or Verona had to do. But we are tremendously down bus drivers. We have mechanics that are driving buses so we can maintain our schools. So, and I send out messages to families if there's buses over 15 minutes late, and we're experiencing a lot of those. We have very full buses. And unfortunately, we had a sign up of August 1st, and we've had 300 new requests for transportation come in since the start of school. So there's a lot of kinks that we have to work out on both sides of it, but please pass the word about anybody that's looking for a morning position or an afternoon or both or midday or athletic trips. We can definitely use them.
Thank you, Jared. Elizabeth?
Hey, Jared, just a follow-up. I've got another question too, but just a follow-up, Jared, on what you just said. I'm assuming, so correct me if I'm wrong, that an increase in 300 requests in that time span is unusual
Yes.
for us. And then do you have a sense of what the contributing factors are there?
I think a couple of things is obviously we weren't in full session last year when we sort of ended the school year, and people's mindset of, school starting, and this is the normal routine after going through COVID. I just think a lot of individuals felt, it wasn't on the radar, and it was sort of a unique start to the school year.
Okay.
Susan?
Well, just because on that same topic, I guess I'm wondering also how the new walk zones have affected that, and whether that's more of it that people didn't realize until it was late and signed up later. And I did see a lot of young kids riding their bikes home today from school, but just would be curious, how that's going, and also how it's never been a great situation when the car is pulling in to drop off. There's always some congestion there, and I just wonder if that's worse or if that's how, that'd be something I'd be interested in hearing about more about. Not that there's a lot we can do about it, but maybe there is. So. And then Elizabeth, I think you had something else. I didn't mean to jump in. I just on the same topic.
No, it was perfect. Mine's on a different topic. So if people have more questions about transportation or Jared, I'll pause.
Susan, did you have a question about transportation?
Just an add-on. Jared, at some point, it would be helpful to know how many of those 300 requests are actual individuals that were affected by the change in the transportation, the expansion of the walk zone. There may be none, but that might be a helpful number to have. Then we would know whether or not that was affecting those requests.
Thank you. Andrew?
Just first off, Jared, I just want to thank you for doing the best you can in this situation that was going on nationally. And also, I know HR is going through some things too with the shortages in the cafeteria. And that's just, again, across the nation. So I'm just saying, just hats off to all of you for being there, doing the best you can, trying to get the emails out in the mornings to let me know that my son's bus is going to be late. These are the things, you're there and HR is there. So just, from me, just keep up the good work. If it's anything we, try to do, help recruit, I'm out there for you because I know that we need to get some workers. So again, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Elizabeth, you had a question?
Oh yeah, let's talk COVID, Dan. So I am just curious about the kind of students in quarantine, and if we had classes that have total classes that have quarantined already this year, or is it more? Because I know the rules around physical distancing and stuff have changed quite dramatically. So I'm just kind of curious what the student impact is since we just started a couple weeks ago.
So no, we have not had to quarantine entire classrooms. We did for one day have to ask an entire classroom not to report while we could do it to give time to conduct our contact tracing. We received notice quite late in the evening from a parent about a positive case. And of course, we have to go through all the seating charts and so on. And that just was not possible to do that late in the evening. So I think our procedures that we have in place are very similar to what we had last fall. Obviously, we have more students in the buildings, but I think the biggest change that's been made is our principal worked really hard to really try to space students as best as possible for lunches. So we have as minimal number of possible of close contacts during that time. But in the classrooms, likewise, obviously the masking is huge to help with that. So that's kind of the big picture about how we're dealing with things. Krista and her team deal firsthand, she coordinates with the health services team, but we did have some to deal with right away from the, first day of school.
Sorry, I just have a quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
With the lunches, I don't know how they're doing lunches. I just know it seems to be going well from the feedback I've got, but are they staggered? Is that how we're spreading it out?
Yeah, so all the principals have the elementary and middle school have been able to adjust schedules so less kids are in the cafeteria at once. Where normally you might have an entire class. So therefore, there's basically half the number of kids. So it has lengthened, the time. Some kids have to eat a little earlier and some later, but that was the only way of trying to minimize the numbers. And so that's been really effective.
All right, Dan, and Elizabeth, you had a question?
I have more questions. Sorry. This is actually a question for the principals, I think, more so than for you, Dan, if they're around. And that's just, how is staff holding up? I saw the note that you sent down around self-care. It sounds like there was some self-care PD that happened at the beginning. But I recognize that this year is a year that I think feels a little similar in some ways to last year. And also, I think, different in the fact that there was, I think, some hope that may have been lost in terms of how normal this year was maybe potentially going to look and then didn't. So I'm just curious about, on the whole, how is staff doing? How are they feeling?
Yeah.
And how things are going and how serious they're taking, your call around really take care of yourself and make sure that you're kind of doing that, put your own oxygen mask on before you support somebody else kind of thing.
Yeah, so I don't have the principals on tonight, but I'll just speak for myself and some of the conversations I've had with teachers. And I think that is fairly representative of our staff as a whole. As you mentioned, Elizabeth, that was, I think we were all so optimistic in July when the numbers were really looking good and we thought we were going to have a more normal type year. And so, yeah, that was hard, I think, when we went through August and realized that, no, we've got a lot of work to do, a lot of planning. And so, I think the messaging is, it's not me, by the way, of course, this is our entire team, right? About, working together and the idea of self-care but I do think our teachers have taken that to heart. The conversations I've had that, they're so excited to be back and see students, but they realize, okay, we got, 2 weeks in or a week and a half in out of 36 weeks, it's a long ways to go. But so I think our staff recognizes that and know that we're in for the long haul. But so I think I would say so far so good. I think our staff feels supported, but it can't just be a 1 week thing. We have to really be sincere and kind of make sure that we don't lose sight of that all year long.
Thank you. And that's all, Lorraine.
Okay, excellent question, Elizabeth. All right, Dan, so we don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next is board reports. So Ad Hoc Sustainability Committee. Peter?
Hi, thank you. The Sustainability Committee last met last Thursday, which was September 2nd. And the big item we discussed was, the most important thing we discussed was the schedule for this high school solar photovoltaic project. We got an update from McKinstry about the status of that. And as as we talked about before, there's been some delays for various reasons, the most significant of which was the solar panel manufacturer ran into a problem with COVID and having to shut down one of their plants. And so the solar panels themselves are delayed. We now have that straightened out and have a commitment, hopefully, for delivery. However, they're not going to be delivered in time for installation this fall. So we are going to have to we're going to have to do the installation in the spring when the weather after the winter weather. They will be in the high school starting in October, installing the AC, alternating current portions of the system. Those are the parts that connect the panels to the building's power supply and to the grid. And then come better weather in the spring, we'll see the panels put on the roof. So, given that, we also talked about adjusting our schedule for various outreach efforts that we have. We did get some feedback that there are other school districts who are watching what we are doing and wanting to know what we do, and how we're going to manage this, and which is exactly what the point was. We wanted to of this project. We want to be a leader, and we want to do it in such a way that it helps other organizations do the same. Other schools in particular do the same sort of thing, both to reduce our costs of running schools and reduce our fossil fuel greenhouse gas production as schools. So that's the update. What do you think? Yeah, that's the update for now.
All right, thank you, Peter. All right, next, possible action items. Resolution authorizing temporary borrowing in an amount not to exceed $8,525,000. Insurance of taxable tax and revenue, anticipation promissory notes, and participation in the PMS levy and aid anticipation notes program.
So this is our annual cash flow borrowing. Due to the schedule of when we receive revenues in order for us to meet payroll and other accounts payable obligations, we do need to cash flow borrow because most of our revenue comes from property taxpayers and state aid, which does not start flowing in until after the first of the year. And our fiscal year starts on July 1st.
Andrew?
I'd like to make the motion to approve this item as presented.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Susan Fox?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
And Lorraine, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Okay, next are discussion items, mandatory COVID vaccinations.
Okay, so this has come up, and a couple of board members have noted that this would be a worthy discussion, and we agreed at the last meeting, or was noted that we would have this in a discussion item for tonight. So tonight, what we'd like to do is, it's not notice for action, but to make sure that it's more of a dialogue, information gathering, and so that we can really talk through, make sure we all understand all the different issues and involved, with the idea of our staff and vaccinations. And so the first thing I just would like to make reference to is the document that was attached, just a short memo from Boardman and Clark with regard to the legal aspect of, as an employer, the ability to mandate vaccines. And I think, it's written out very clearly that, that there does now appear to be pretty strong legal standing that an employer may in fact mandate vaccines, and with two very clear exceptions, that we would need to consider reasonable accommodations for employees who cannot be vaccinated due to a disability or a sincerely held religious belief. And those are, pretty clear, exceptions that would need to be considered. There are, of course, a lot of other considerations with that. And so I think we're all aware that in Dane County, MMSD is considering that. There was a resolution that was approved, basically directing the administration to do further study and come back with a recommendation. And the superintendent's gone on record that he supports such a mandate, but the details have not been presented yet, exactly how that would look as to what it really means by mandatory. And then also, of course, our largest school district in the state, Milwaukee Public Schools as well, is considering the same thing. They have not taken action at this point, but they also are giving strong consideration to a mandate. And so those are the two districts that I'm familiar with that are considering it at this point. And then there's a lot of districts like us that are having dialogue, but no one to the point of moving forward with a recommendation, at least at this time. So so why don't I maybe pause there and see, as board members, where you want to go with, this dialogue and discussion.
Peter?
Thank you. I raised this issue a couple of weeks ago. And everything I've seen since that time has reinforced this. I don't know if anybody's following the news out of Miami-Dade, which is a very large school district, but has had now the total of 13 employees die of COVID since school started. And it's really frightening. And it's partly because they have low vaccination rates. I believe that given the legal justification with the full approval of the Pfizer vaccine, that I would strongly encourage. I believe the district should have a vaccine mandate, both to protect our teachers, and again, it does dramatically reduce the ability to spread COVID. So it's not about protecting individuals; it's protecting everybody in our district. So I would support a vaccine mandate. I believe that this is an operational issue and an operational decision. So I believe that Dan and HR and administration can make this decision to institute a mandate. However, if we want to, as a board, or if Dan wants the backing of the board on this issue, I'm happy for a resolution to be brought before the board supporting or requiring a vaccine mandate in our district. Thank you.
Susan. Thank you, Peter. Susan?
I thought the other document that Dan provided to us that clearly outlined the Wisconsin Education Association Council's support for vaccinating teachers. And on the news tonight, they also talked about, on the national news, in Florida, in a school district, 13 teachers had died.
Employees, but yes.
You're right, staff. They call them staff.
Staff, yeah.
Also that California, Illinois, and New York City have already required teachers to be vaccinated. And Madison School District actually hold their teachers, and my recollection, it was, Peter, do you remember 85%? Yeah, 85% supported mandatory vaccines.
85% of the teachers in the union, not the entire district.
Yeah, that was MTI, not the district. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You want to react. The other thing that I think we could do tonight, if we're interested in doing that, is I think we could either take consensus or make a motion to direct the superintendent to draft a plan for staff vaccine requirements that we could consider at the September 21st meeting. Because right now, again, it's important to have the discussion, but we can't see the plan. So it's difficult to really get a feel for where we are. And that's exactly what Madison did. They said, we want you to go back and give us a plan. And we want that for the next meeting. And actually, I talked to Nikki about it a little bit. And she said they thought it was really important to be able to see what the plan was. And again, we need to understand that there's still exclusionary groups that have to be addressed in that plan. And the Boardman Clark thing also outlined that very well. So I would support requesting that we get a plan presented at the 21st meeting so that if there is board support to do this, we can move forward.
Susan Fox?
Well, we aren't agendized tonight to make a motion or take any overt action, but I think, yeah, you could get some kind of consensus from conversation. I would also be in support of that because, yeah, Madison actually did vote to direct their administration to come up with a plan. So, I mean, it was on their agenda. I think they actually took a vote. But anyway, I think just this last sentence on the press release from WEAC, quoting the new president of WEAC, saying, as we've seen with everyone through the pandemic, it's something critically important for our educators for taking care of themselves, but also for their own understanding of working with their student population and supporting them along the way. So I think, part of it is some of the kids who are getting it, I think that's been traced to teachers in at least a couple cases. I don't know about the Florida cases specifically where the teachers got it, but it is a way of, the teachers, I think, feeling more and being more protected themselves, but also for protecting those elementary students who can't get the vaccine yet and likely will not until maybe December, won't be eligible. So I think that's still a concern for parents as well. And I guess as we see more businesses and more venues throughout our city, and even though Dane County is about 75% vaccinated, I don't have any idea what our numbers are for our staff. I would think it would be at least that. Maybe I would hope it would be higher, but I don't know. And that is something we can ask. But I would be supportive also of coming up with a plan, understanding that for disability and religious reasons, as with other things, we would have to make accommodations. But.
Elizabeth, I do see your hand. I
I think Eric had his hand up first. I think you beat me, so you go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just want to jump in really quick. Dan, have you thought about if we did have the mandate, those teachers that would not want to participate, what would happen with those teachers, basically?
Great question. So I think one thing that's really important to clarify is that WEAC's recommendation is that all teachers either are vaccinated or submit to regular testing.
Right.
And that is very different than an actual vaccine mandate, where you would have a very narrow exception for disability or religious belief. That recommendation is that anyone can choose to opt out and just go into testing. And so there's a lot of question about what does that accomplish and how effective is it to have people tested as opposed to being unvaccinated. So I think we need to be really, understand that there is a difference there. And as was mentioned, the administration has not come forth with their proposal yet. They will be doing that later this month. We'll see exactly how that plays out, in Madison. But I think that's something that we need to consider. An actual vaccine mandate where you only allow exceptions due to disability or sincerely held religious beliefs would mean then that you need to make a decision on individuals who choose not to vaccinate. And it could include unpaid suspension up to termination. And that's something that this board would need to be able to consider, and that would require, board action to make that kind of a decision as to that being part of a plan. So that's one of the considerations that needs to be discussed when we're looking at a possible mandate.
Okay, Eric.
Well, a couple of things. One, I really don't, it frustrates me when we compare ourselves to other districts, whether it be Madison or other unions. We don't need to do that. We really don't. We have smart enough, very intelligent board members and administrators. We can make our own decisions without basing them off of what other people are doing. With that, I completely support a vaccine mandate. I would. And the exemptions, of course, are important for religious reasons or disability. Those need to stay there, and they would stay there with the vaccine mandate. I agree with Dan about the testing, that's not a full safe way to, say a vaccine without a vaccine mandate saying that, or you can have the testing is not a mandate of the vaccine. And I compare this similar to I used to work at UPS for a long time, and there was mandatory drug testing, and they would never tell you when you would get it if you drove a vehicle, which I did. So they could come in anytime with no notice and drug test you. And that was something that you agreed on when you were employed there. The only big difference here that concerns me a little, Dan, is a lot of people, when they originally came into this job, this is a big change. So they came in without this mandate. And now if we implement a mandate, there has to be some sort of easing period for people. And we don't know how many people would opt out of it. So I guess, there's no way to find that out. But I wouldn't want a vaccine mandate with the automatic, dismissal, or like getting rid of staff, because we don't know what that number is. And that's not really fair to people that came in without that intention of working for the district. So there'd have to be some sort of easing period with whatever group or number that would to discuss that without termination right away, to kind of get a feel for what it is and then develop a plan for that. So that's how I feel about it. But I definitely would support this. It's absolutely a safety concern, and it's needed at this time, unfortunately. This is where we are, and this is what we need to do, and it's the best and safest thing for all of our students in the district.
Thank you, Eric. Elizabeth?
I appreciate that, Eric. I mean, I agree around it being, safety and high priority. And certainly as a parent, I wouldn't feel comfortable if my child was in a classroom and the person leading the classroom wasn't vaccinated. The wondering I have is there a way to get us that goal? All right, so if we can say that that's the goal, right? That's the goal. Is there a way to get us to that goal without mandating what happens? And and the answer may be no, but that's the question that I have, right? Because my concern around, in a fraught time, taking a thing, right, that has been, politicized or whatever else around it, and then making a mandate around it. I don't know how useful that is going to be, right? How many people are we talking about? Like, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 30, right? And so if it's 5, let's just use really basic round numbers. If it's 5 people in our whole district that aren't going to get mandated, or that aren't going to get vaccinated, a vaccine mandate is likely not going to all of a sudden make those 5 people then want to get vaccinated, right? Unless we do something really serious around having some really serious teeth in it, right? Serious consequence. And I just don't think that's the pathway we want to go down, especially when we talk about educator shortages and all the other complicating factors that come with that. And so I'm not opposed to incentivizing it. I'm not opposed to strongly encouraging it. I'm not even necessarily opposed to having a either or situation. I guess my concern is around like a really rigid mandate and what the unintended consequences are for what benefit or gain, which without data in front of me in terms of like how many people we're talking about, it's hard for me to determine whether or not we're really getting a gain for what could be potential liabilities.
Susan Manning?
I think, one of the things we were seeing in the WEAC statement was that they talked about the survey. So maybe because we have 2 weeks, maybe one of the things we want to do before we would actually take action on this is get a feel for how the staff feels. So maybe we would try and do a survey, and then we could look at the plan. The other thing I want to do is clarify in the WEAC statement by the WEAC president, they specifically said, we believe that all teachers, education support professionals, adults in the building, and eligible students should be vaccinated. Those with rare exceptions who aren't vaccinated must be tested regularly. So there's, as Dan stated, there are a couple ways to go. One is you can say, we mandate vaccinations except for those who have the religious or the disability, or for another documented reason, do not choose to be vaccinated. So that is a choice that we make. But that isn't the the rigorous testing in the WEAC statement is for those who are under the exceptions, rather than giving them a choice between mandate or no mandate. In the quoted statement in that document.
Susan Fox?
Yeah, I'm very aware too that there's a difference in those two things. And I think part of that was, I thought if the administration can discuss it, it kind of throws the ball back to you guys. What is more realistic, because of all of the concerns that, Elizabeth raised, some of those that we don't, I don't have any idea really how many of our teachers have already had it. I guess if we were going to do a survey, I'd like to know how many teachers have had it. I mean, what percentage are we talking about here? And that might help inform whether you made an actual mandate and just did testing for these legal exemptions, or whether we want to offer testing for people who are just, for whatever reason, don't want the vaccine. I'm not thrilled with that, only because I don't know how worthwhile that is. But I guess it's better than not doing anything. I mean, and it might eventually, I think part of the hope in places that are doing that is that people will get tired of being tested every week, or how you have to do it pretty often. So that's another question, is what's the availability of tests? Because I think if we offer that, we have to I don't know if we have to provide them or we don't have to provide them. That's another question. Do we have access to those? Can we make sure people can get tested weekly? How worthwhile is that? I think part of the thinking was that maybe people will get tired of it and go ahead and get the vaccine because it's easier and it's certainly much better. So I feel ambivalent about that piece, but I figure that's where administrators know, the staff more. And I do think it would be helpful to know whether people have been vaccinated or not. I mean, I'll say again, when I went for my first usher training for Overture, they asked all of us as we were signing in whether we'd been vaccinated or not. And then like a couple weeks ago, we had to submit a copy of our vaccination card or the records to prove it. But they asked that night, and I thought, well, good. And it turned out that a huge percentage had already, everybody the night I was there had been vaccinated. So, we may end up finding out that practically all of our teachers have been vaccinated, and then maybe it's a matter of talking to a few people. There may be different ways to handle it, I guess is what I'm saying. But I do think it's important. I think because we are looking at a long time until our younger kids can get the vaccine. And I don't have any idea how many of our kids who are eligible, how many of them have had it. I mean, I think that would all be useful information, not names, but just what percentage of our students have had it. Is just all helpful information to consider when talking about this. But I think that's the other thing, though. Adults as teachers should set an example, and you didn't have, the polio vaccine, something most people just get automatically without thinking much about it. People keep bringing up George Washington made his troops get it. And that was a way worse way to get a vaccine. The smallpox vaccine was not pretty. But we've had a long history of that, of making that kind of requirement. I don't think it's unreasonable at this point. So
I just want to follow up with what Susan Fox talked about. Dan, if we did get the information about vaccinations, would it be self-reporting or would it be, from their doctors?
Yep. No, great question. And so we have talked a lot about that. And one of the things that there's a couple different ways that we could get that information. And so one of the things we wanted tonight's discussion to help guide how we might go about that as well. As Susan mentioned, one way is simply to ask employees voluntarily to tell us. And that would be, somewhat reliable data. The next step would be to ask for verification. Obviously, that's a little bit more time intensive and more work to do, but that would give us, more certainty. What I can tell you about the data that we know, I'd shared with you the link from DHS that shows that in our school district, 75% of all residents in our district are vaccinated. That's for all residents. And so if you subtract off the children 11 under who are not eligible, of eligible people, that gets you above 85%. Now that does not break down for employees, obviously, but if we do this, I would be very surprised if we're not well above 90% of employees, that are. But Again, that's something that I think is important. So again, depending on where we land tonight with this discussion, it'd be very simple to just survey it and ask people to voluntarily report to get that number. To go the next step and actually verify would be more work, but we could do that as well if we need to.
I'm not sure who was first, Elizabeth, and then Eric. Sorry, okay.
Yeah, I mean, just want to state for the record, when I look at the WEAC statement, I 1000% agree that all educators should be vaccinated, right? So that's, like I said, we have the same end goal here, same end line. I am really in full support of a survey, Dan. I'm fine with it being self-report. I think though that the survey itself has to be a requirement, like everyone has to fill it out. And the extent to which they're comfortable self-reporting and those kinds of things, I mean, you're going to get a little bit of error because that's just how surveys work in general, regardless of what the topic is. But I think that we need 100% completion rate on it in order for us to make a useful decision. And again, I really want to keep coming back to this idea of like, what is the purpose of a mandate, right? It presupposes there's a problem or a difficulty or a problem that needs to be solved. We may find through our data that there is or isn't, and then we can talk about, okay, what do we do next to incentivize X or disincentivize Y or whatever it's going to look like. But I think you can't make an informed decision unless you actually know what it is that you're looking for and talking about. So I would definitely be in favor of that. And this may be a little controversial, I don't know. I also think job type matters in terms of student facing versus non-student facing or less student facing staff. And so I'm curious to know if you've thought about that as well, right? Like a classroom teacher versus a non-student facing staff potentially as just being different, right? The standard may be different and we can maybe apply a different standard. And then the third thing that I just don't want to lose the train of thought on is as we think about this as a new operating procedure, is it an operating procedure in this time span because we're in the middle of a pandemic, or I'm not actually sure if it's the middle anymore. Maybe it's still the beginning, maybe it's toward the end, but we're in the midst of a pandemic, or is this how we operate in perpetuity? And I think that matters too, in terms of at some point in time when we're over this hump of COVID, are we still going to require staff to have a COVID vaccine? And then we don't have to talk about this now because I don't want to slippery slope it, but that may implicate other things, right? Flu vaccines and those kinds of things. So just the other thing I want to throw out there in terms of what are our guardrails? What kind of box are we working in? Are we like in a shoebox or are we in like a giant TV box? Because I think that makes a difference also in terms of what we do.
Eric, and then Peter.
Yeah, I agree, with Elizabeth. Also, I think, Dan, timing is of the essence, so it'd be important to move quickly. I don't think this is an area where we want to continue to discuss. I trust our administration to put together a survey, bring it to us if they need to. But also just reiterating, the exemptions are there. So if someone has religious beliefs or disability, those are not the types, if you're an employee with those two things, you will have an exemption. There will be a process for you to go through the exemption, but that doesn't mean that you are going to be in jeopardy of losing your job or anything because you will be exempt. You'll have to document that, but that's the process. So we're really only talking about probably a very small percentage of staff that don't fall under that exemption and that choose not to get the vaccine. So I would be also curious, Dan, of making sure when you do the survey to make sure there is something on there for the employees that will be exempt so they don't feel singled out, like maybe do you have the vaccine, yes or no? Do you consider yourself part of an exemption, whether it be religious or disability, so that, we know what that group is going to be. I think that'll also be more truthful for people when they answer too.
Thank you, Eric. Peter?
To be honest, I don't see a decision point in the survey. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we have a fairly high compliance, and whether it's 75%, 85%, or 95%, unless it's 100%, and it won't be 100%, I don't see a reason for a survey. We either have a mandate or not, but I don't see a decision point between 95% and 85%, or for me, 95% or 75%. I just, to me, there's no decision point there. I think we should have a mandate with the exemptions that have been outlined, and roll with that and deal with that as it is. And we can spend a lot of time. And we really should get this moved. We're going to do this, or we're not going to do this. If we're going to do this, we should get it moving. We should get it moving as soon as possible. And the problem with the survey, yeah, I mean, it takes time, but that's not the issue. The issue to me is I don't see a decision point in the information from the survey. I can think of all the possible answers that could come from the survey, and I don't see any of them changing my mind as to what
Peter,
the exact mandate.
One decision point might be, we understand if we may be losing staff, and that would be important to understand and know that. So that would be one area where a survey could be beneficial, in my view. That's what I'm thinking of, what it's going to really come into play.
We have a responsibility to protect the health and safety of students and staff. And I'm not even sure what you said. If we're losing staff over this, I'm not sure. I don't think that would make it change my mind in terms of a decision to mandate. Maybe if half the staff were going to leave, then we got a problem. But I don't think half that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we already have high compliance, and I think we will have high compliance. And so I think we should. And if the administration believes they need more support for this, I believe that we should just move ahead to a resolution at our next board meeting.
Susan Manning?
Again, I think one of the reasons we are still trying to figure out, I agree with Peter. I think this is a safety issue. And that is why the state of Oregon also, these are full states that are mandating the vaccine for public school staff. And I think in 2 weeks, by the time we see a plan with Dan, I'm going to be very surprised if we don't see another 10 plus states. Since we're empowered to do this at our level, and we see the areas where they're already doing it for the safety of their staff. So Unity Point Meritor Hospital, St. Mary's Hospital, and University Hospital have already mandated for their staff. Now we can try and make it complicated, but if you go to DPI and you look at required vaccinations for students, they're required by state statute. Right now, because of the legislature composition, it would be difficult to try and do that at a state level, but we have the opportunity as a district to do this. And we can also see what other districts are doing if that's important to us. But the safety issue, and I mean, when WEAC, who's the state's largest teachers union, is calling for all teachers and staff to be vaccinated with a mandate, then that's a message to us as board members.
Thank you. Dan, I would be interested in your feedback regarding this.
Yeah. Well, so I think, and this has been said by several board members, speaking for myself personally, I believe all school employees should be vaccinated unless they can't because of religious belief or disability. What I struggle with personally is, and what we all don't know, right, is do we have employees that will refuse to be vaccinated that don't fit in one of those categories? That's the big question. So that concerns me, that if we do, what does that mean? And as far as, knowing that we have a labor shortage, are we going to be able to deal with that if we're not going to be able to allow those folks to work? We're not even talking termination. As Eric said, that's only a step in there. But I think we would have to, if we had a mandate, we would have to say you can't work or be around students if you're not vaccinated, whatever that looks like. So that's my concern, but it is an unknown. There's no question about that. So I do believe that if we're going to do a mandate, we do it. I don't believe it's the right thing to simply a choice, either get vaccinated or get tested. I think if there's a mandate, the only people that are exempt are the people that meet those criteria, that we talked about. So, I think, if that's something that the board would like a resolution to that effect to consider at our next meeting, absolutely, I can have that ready to go. And I think that's the biggest challenge is how we deal with if we have employees that make a choice not to get vaccinated. And so my thought would be that I would work with legal counsel to look at what kind of flexibility do we have, short of termination. Are there other things that we could do? That's the big question in my mind right now.
Thank you. Andrew? You're on mute.
There we go. After I listen to everybody, and everybody has some great points. The thing that I think that for me that we're missing here is the common sense value. I know that we're talking about adults here, and adults should know when to use their common sense. But it's been shown over these few years, depending on what news source that you watch, that news source makes up your mind. And that's the big problem. That's what's going on in the United States right now, is that no one is using their own common sense. They're not making their own judgment. They're just looking at a source and then they just running with it. And every news source out here is different, depending on what you watch. Forcing, this is a slippery slope for me, because I try to do my best as a board member to use some common sense. I think that looking at our numbers here in the school district, it looks pretty high. Maybe can get higher if someone feels that they should go out and get it. But then we go with that religion and the other things, and I don't want to force that on nobody. This is a slippery slope. This is a very, very tough decision on me. I see where everybody's probably leaning to, but it's kind of difficult for me. It's just like when people tell you, eat your vegetables, it make you healthy, but some people may be allergic to broccoli. You can't eat that. I know that I'm pretty sure I'm allergic to the flu shot because I always have complications. So sometimes maybe, we don't know if this shot here is compatible with someone's body. We don't know that. And that's probably why some people wouldn't even try it, and those are the things that come up. I know it's a small percentage, but I just don't want to be holding no one hostage and coming up making this decision because I don't feel comfortable with it. We know we're short-staffed. We know, we just know that there's just a lot of things going on around here. This is very, very tough for me, and I know it's tough for the board. We've been going through it since last year. So, of course, Dan, I support what, you bring out anything. I don't have a survey. I like the staff, the teachers' input, to just, get our numbers, because we, again, like Eric said, we can't compare ourselves to other school districts. Other school districts, they're going through it. But I think that our community, I think that the people that live here in our community do use common sense and they do the right thing. Maybe not some, there may be a few out there that don't, but I think in a majority, I think we overcome a lot of things. And you see here, we're back in school. Our numbers, breakout numbers are really, really low. We haven't had no major breakout where we have to shut the school down. Kids are doing it safely. Staff is doing it safely. And I think I want to commend everybody, the staff and the students that are doing what they're supposed to do, wearing the mask, There's people who are taking the vaccinations and whatever. But I think that our school district can be a leader in Wisconsin by just doing, just having the community use their common sense to just do what they have to do that's best for them and the families. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Andrew. Peter?
Wisconsin has in fact, all 50 states have a mandate for vaccines for children. They're with exemptions, and I totally believe that we can hold our teachers to that same standard. Currently, COVID is not on that list, but there are quite a number of vaccines that are. And I suspect COVID will end up in the future on that list of mandatory vaccines for children.
Thank you, Peter. Susan Fox? Oh, you're on mute.
That fixed. That's, I guess, one of the reasons I thought it might be useful, even though it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me, but to have some idea what the percentage really is rather than speculate, because I agree that I suspect it likely is higher than 75 or 80%. It may be 90, maybe 95. If it's 99% and there are one or two people, it might, and maybe there are people who don't work. I mean, we don't have many people other than people in the district office who don't see kids all the time, because clerical people also come into contact with kids. So there aren't really many in the schools. I can't think of anybody who's not around kids, at least some of the time. But it just would be useful to think about how to handle it if we found out that virtually everybody had it. But I guess I do think it's an obligation. I mean, we also require TB tests, right? When everybody gets hired, do we ever have somebody, what if somebody refuses to get it? They don't get the job, right? I mean, there are rules like that we have to follow. And getting a test is different, but they still have to prick your arm and, you go through the test. So I just think this is such a serious, I really do feel we would not be in this position if people would just get vaccinated and everyone were to wear masks everywhere. I know that's not happening for a while, but it's increasingly frustrating to still be in this situation because we're not doing that. And I think that's where we can play a role in setting at least this one step. I mean, we've already decided that people have to wear masks, and that's a good thing, and that's more common. But I think the vaccine does make sense, because really until by far the majority of the population is vaccinated, this is what we're going to be dealing with. And I think it is important to keep our eyes on the whole goal that we want to keep kids in school all year this year. We already had one email asking, are we planning, what if we have to pivot to virtual again? Man, that's what we want to avoid. And this is one thing we can do that might help us avoid that. Nothing's foolproof, but it's at least a step. So I lean toward doing that as well. But so I guess I'm just saying in terms of a mandate versus allowing any exception for testing. If it's 2 or 3 people, maybe that's okay. If it's more than that, maybe it isn't. I just don't know how much pressure we have to put. It depends on numbers to me to some extent. But
Susan, I just wanted to get clarification. So are you also in support of having a survey as well?
Well, if we could do a survey and say they have to get it back by the end of the week, I mean, it's a yes or no question, right? And then with the added thing, as Eric mentioned, you might want to ask if your answer is no, drop down, is this because of a religious, objection or disability? And then so we'd have an idea what numbers we're talking about. That might be useful. I don't know that we have to do that. I guess I'd leave that to administration to talk about it more. But if we don't do it, then I guess I'm in favor of just doing the mandate at this point.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, just last thing. I 100% agree with everything that you just said, Susan Fox. And, for me, why it's important for us to get some real tangible numbers is because outside of the exemptions that have already been stated today, right, other folks that are, choosing not to get it for other reasons, like compliance for those folks won't come from sticks and carrots. It just won't. It'll come in relationship. And so the way that I look at it is like, if we're talking about 2 people, we don't need a mandate, right? That's like an in relationship conversation with trusted folks or HR, or however we want to handle that, or Dan, however your team wants to handle that. But putting the mandate on it in that instance, right, just as a really ludicrous this end of the spectrum example, it's obviously going to be more than 2 people, right? But us putting a mandate in it, right, then just steals a person up, right? It just steals a person up and increases that whole sense of, well, this is what I've been talking about, right? And it riles that part of the brain where you're in fight, flight, or freeze, and no one wins there. And so again, it's not that don't think everyone that works with our youth should be vaccinated. I absolutely think they do. I think that if the numbers say that a mandate is going to be useful, because there will be some folks by which sticks and carrots will be useful. But if we're talking about a small group of folks, that type of compliance will only happen in relationship. And so it doesn't matter how much we, try to say, do this or else, because the response will be no. And then we'll have to make our decisions around, then you're not a good fit here or not. And I'm just not sure we're in a position to do that right now. So, but that is the last thing I will say about that. Thank you.
All right. And I would also be in support of a survey, just to kind of get some feedback from staff before making a decision. All right.
Okay, so
Can I just say one more thing about the survey? I'm interested in knowing whether people have had it or not. A little bit less so on whether they support it, because if it's a safety issue, I mean, support might be nice to know, but that's not going to be a deal breaker for me. To me, it's more interesting to know how many people have already had it and how many are we talking about trying to convince to get it or get to get it somehow.
I agree, Susan. And the shorter we can make
Versus
it, the more
opinion.
likely it is you're going to get compliance with it anyway.
Right.
okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify, that if we survey in order to have results for you on a timely basis, it would be asking, our staff to voluntarily, share with us their vaccination status. We wouldn't have time to follow up with confirmation of that. It will be a survey asking them to self-report, and that we can have for you, pretty quickly.
And if we don't get total participation, that'll tell us something too, I guess. Negative, but okay, thanks.
I agree with Susan that whether there's a survey or not really doesn't matter to me. I think it's for you, Dan, if that's what you need to do to get to where we need to be, that's fine. But I mean, however we need to get there as quick as possible I would support. So I don't need to know if people are vaccinated or not. It doesn't. Its information doesn't mean anything to me.
Thank you, Eric. Susan?
I suggested the survey only because of Elizabeth's concerns, and I thought that might alleviate some of these concerns. But again, I'm going to send you this document about the other states that are doing this, because you have governors of the state of Oregon and the state of Wisconsin who are coming out and specifically mandating. Again, we mandate other vaccines. It took us a while to understand how serious some of those illnesses, such as polio and some of those diseases were. But we do understand how this has killed hundreds of thousands of people. So I'm not in a position to really start getting hung up on this. I think I'm hearing a pretty clear consensus for a mandate. Dan can bring us the language, and we as a board can pass it or not pass it. And if we have the additional information from the staff that gives us, as a board, the community direction from our district that we would like to have, that's helpful. But at some point, we have to understand, like, I'm sorry, I have a son that is standing, and Lorene, I'm sorry, the families that are being affected by this disease every day. 2 of my grandchildren have already gotten it. Another 2 have been quarantined for weeks because another student in their class had it. We need to keep our teachers safe. And right now, this is the scientific evidence we have that says this helps.
Thank you, Susan. Dan, were you going to share something?
Hey, I just wanted to make sure that, we're 100% clear about what the expectations are of the board. So I think I heard very clear consensus that the board would like, whatever language we need for consideration with regard to a mandate. I'll have that ready to go for our next meeting. And I think I heard at least the majority of our board members would still appreciate some survey data to consider. So that those would be the two expectations for information for you for our next meeting.
Thank you, Dan. Eric?
Oh, I was just going to say to Susan Manning's information about governors, I think it's a little ironic that governors and state legislators are trying to step in when the whole past 16 months has been up to us to make the really tough and hard decisions. So I have no sympathy for them whatsoever, nor do I really care to listen to them, because this decision is on us locally. They can't switch their minds all of a sudden and try to step in when we've been carrying the heavy weight on our shoulders this entire pandemic to make the really difficult decisions. So I'd say we have enough, we can do this ourselves. We don't need to worry about what they're doing.
Amen to that, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. All right, it looks like there's no other further questions. So next is the future meeting dates. So we have a meeting on September 13th, our annual meeting and budget hearing at 6 o'clock. And then the other future dates are all on board docs. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I got you first, Andrew.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Bye.
Motion is carried. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.